The vast darkness of space stretched endlessly before Admiral Du-Wan's vessel. Stars twinkled like distant jewels against the black canvas, but his attention remained fixed on the blue-green planet displayed in perfect holographic detail before him. Earth, such a simple name for what might be the most intriguing discovery his species had made in centuries. Du-Wan's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he studied the rotating image. His scaled fingers tapped rhythmically on the arm of his command chair, a habit that his crew had learned meant their admiral was deep in thought. The morning calm hung in high orbit, cloaked from Earth's primitive detection systems, while its advanced sensors gathered data about the planet below. "Fascinating," he muttered, zooming in on various military installations across the planet's surface. The humans' technology was laughably basic. They still used chemical propulsion for their spacecraft, and their weapons relied on crude projectiles rather than energy-based systems. Yet there was something about their military organization that made Du-Wan's scales tingle with unease. The bridge of the morning calm was quiet except for the soft hum of equipment and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. The crew worked efficiently at their posts, their movements precise and practiced. They were the best of the Coalition's observation fleet, chosen specifically for this mission. Through the ship's massive viewing window, Earth's curvature was visible, a brilliant arc of blue and white that seemed deceptively peaceful. Du-Wan had observed many worlds in his long career, but something about this one was different. The humans' military bases were positioned with a strategic precision that suggested a deep understanding of warfare. Their training facilities showed constant activity, and their defensive installations were arranged in patterns that spoke of sophisticated tactical thinking. "High Commander," a voice called out, breaking his concentration. Captain Jai-Ho approached the command platform, holding a data crystal that gleamed under the bridge's soft lighting. "The analysis team has completed their preliminary assessment of human military installations." Du-Wan accepted the crystal, noting how Jai-Ho's tail twitched slightly, a sign of excitement in their species. Inserting the crystal into his chair's data port, he watched as new information flooded his personal display. The findings were even more interesting than he'd expected. The humans conducted regular, large-scale military exercises, moving thousands of troops and vehicles in coordinated patterns. They maintained massive stockpiles of their primitive weapons, but the organization and distribution of these arsenals showed remarkable foresight. Their communication systems, while unsophisticated, were redundant and robust. "Look at this," Du-Wan said, gesturing Jai-Ho closer. "They've developed countermeasures for technologies they haven't even encountered yet. See how their bases are hardened against energy weapons. They're preparing for threats they can only imagine." Jai-Ho's secondary eyes widened in surprise. "But their technological level suggests they shouldn't even understand the concept of plasma weapons, let alone how to defend against them." "Exactly," Du-Wan replied, his voice carrying a note of respect. "They're innovative, creative. They compensate for their technological limitations with tactical sophistication." The Admiral stood, his tall frame casting a shadow across the holographic display. He walked to the viewing window, clasping his hands behind his back. The Coalition had initially dismissed Earth as another primitive world, barely worth studying, but Du-Wan had seen something in their military structure that others had missed. "Their weapons may be simple," he continued, "but their thinking is not. Look at their training protocols, constant drills, endless simulations, continuous improvement. They're not just maintaining their military, they're evolving it every day." Jai-Ho moved to stand beside him. "Should we be concerned?" "Concerned? No." Du-Wan turned to face his captain. "We should be interested, very interested. The Coalition has focused on technological advancement for so long, we've forgotten there are other paths to military excellence." Walking back to his command chair, Du-Wan made the decision that would change the course of interstellar relations. "Prepare a message for the Coalition Council. Tell them I strongly recommend immediate diplomatic contact with Earth." As Jai-Ho hurried to relay the order, Du-Wan settled back in his chair, still studying the holographic display. These humans may possess military innovations we've overlooked, he mused aloud, and I intend to find out exactly what they are. The morning calm continued its silent orbit around Earth, its crew unaware that their admiral's decision would soon set in motion events that would reshape their understanding of warfare and of humanity itself. In the gleaming crystal towers of the Coalition's Technology Acquisition Division, Minister Hay-Newell sat at her desk, her iridescent scales shimmering with excitement as she pored over the latest diplomatic reports from Earth. The holographic displays around her flickered with images and data streams, painting the office in a soft, ethereal glow. The humans had not only agreed to technological exchange talks, but had shown an eagerness that surprised even the most optimistic Coalition analysts. Hay-Newell's three-fingered hand traced through the air, manipulating the holographic displays to show various human military installations and training grounds. Minister, her assistant Taimin entered the office, carrying a fresh batch of data crystals. The latest observation reports have arrived. You might find this particularly interesting. His tail swished with amusement as he loaded the crystals into the display system. New images sprang to life around them. Vast areas of land where humans moved in coordinated patterns, vehicles kicked up dust clouds, and aircraft soared overhead in formation. Hay-Newell leaned forward, her primary eyes widening with curiosity. They're so primitive, they still practice something called war games, Taimin noted, unable to hide his amusement. Imagine wasting resources pretending to fight. He gestured at one of the recordings, where tanks maneuvered across an open field, firing practice rounds. Hay-Newell nodded, but something about the concept tugged at her mind. Their own civilization had abandoned physical military exercises millennia ago. With perfect simulation technology that could replicate any scenario down to the quantum level, actual drills seemed redundant and wasteful. Yet watching the humans move across the landscape, there was an efficiency to their actions that couldn't be ignored. Look at this, she said, enlarging one particular image. See how they adapt to unexpected terrain changes, how they adjust their formations on the fly. The humans below were responding to a sudden weather change, reorganizing their units without apparent confusion or delay. Taimin's scales shifted color slightly, indicating his growing interest. But surely our simulation programs are more sophisticated than this primitive physical training. Perhaps, Hay-Newell mused, but when was the last time any of our military personnel faced an actual unexpected situation? When did they last feel real rain on their scales during a deployment exercise? The question hung in the air between them. The Coalition's military might was unquestioned, their technology far superior to anything Earth possessed. Yet watching these humans train, Hay-Newell sensed something they might have lost in their rush toward perfect simulation. She rose from her desk, walking to the window that overlooked the capital city's sprawling expanse. The perfect order of their architecture, the precisely calculated patterns of their transport systems, everything in Coalition society was optimized, simulated, and planned to perfection. We've become too comfortable with our predictions, she said softly, too reliant on our ability to calculate every variable. These humans, they're preparing for the unpredictable. Turning back to her assistant, Hay-Newell's scales rippled with determination. Schedule an observation team, she decided. I want to see these war games firsthand. And Taimin, make sure the team includes members from our military's tactical division. I want experts who can appreciate what we're seeing. As Taimin hurried to carry out her orders, Hay-Newell returned to studying the footage. The humans below continued their exercises, oblivious to the profound effect they were having on their hidden observers. Their movements might seem crude and wasteful to Coalition eyes, but there was a purpose to their actions that couldn't be replicated in any simulation. What else have we forgotten? She wondered aloud, watching a group of human soldiers charging across muddy terrain, their faces showing determination despite the difficult conditions. What other wisdom have we sacrificed in our pursuit of perfect technology? The answer, she suspected, would reshape their understanding of military preparedness and perhaps challenge the very foundations of how the Coalition approached warfare. As she prepared for her own journey to Earth, Hey Newell couldn't shake the feeling that these primitive humans might teach them lessons their advanced civilization had long forgotten. The diplomatic shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, its advanced dampeners barely containing the turbulence as it approached the designated observation zone. Sun Wu's scales rippled with anticipation as he pressed his face against the reinforced window, all four eyes wide with wonder at his first close-up view of human military activity. What he saw below made his blood run cold. The European countryside stretched out beneath them, but it was hardly the peaceful landscape he had expected. Explosions rocked the ground in coordinated patterns, sending dirt and debris high into the air. Tanks and armored vehicles moved in complex formations, their weapons blazing as they engaged in what appeared to be full-scale combat. "This can't be right," Sun Wu muttered, his translator working overtime to keep up with his agitated speech. "We're supposed to be observing a training exercise." Keita, the military attaché, joined him at the window. His normally composed demeanor cracked as he watched another wave of explosions light up the landscape. "By the first stars," he whispered, his scales turning a pale shade of green. "The casualties must be enormous." But their human escort, Lieutenant Rogers, sat calmly in his seat, checking something on his primitive digital device with apparent disinterest. His relaxed posture seemed wildly inappropriate given the chaos unfolding below. The shuttle banked sharply, giving them a better view of the battlefield. Fighter jets screamed past their vessel, executing maneuvers that seemed to defy the limits of their primitive technology. The precision of their movements was shocking. These weren't the clumsy atmospheric craft the Coalition had expected. "Lieutenant," Sun Wu turned to their escort, trying to keep his voice steady. "I believe there's been a terrible mistake. We were scheduled to observe a military exercise, not an actual conflict." Rogers looked up from his device, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "This is the exercise, sir. Not a war games, just as scheduled." Sun Wu's translator must have malfunctioned. He looked at Keita for confirmation, but his colleague appeared equally confused. Below them, a formation of helicopters emerged from behind a hill, launching what appeared to be missiles at ground targets. But the destruction. Keita gestured helplessly at the scene below. "The loss of life." "Oh, don't worry about that," Rogers said, standing up to get a better view himself. "Those are training munitions. Makes a big show, but no real damage. Well, except maybe to the grass." The aliens exchanged bewildered looks. Sun Wu's mind raced to process what he was seeing. The scale of the operation was staggering. Thousands of personnel, hundreds of vehicles, aircraft filling the skies. The cost and resources alone must have been astronomical. "You do this for practice?" Sun Wu asked, his translator struggling to convey his mix of horror and fascination. "Sure," Rogers replied, pointing to a new formation of vehicles moving into position. "Watch this next part. The Polish Armor Division is about to attempt a breakthrough of the French defensive line." They'd been practicing this maneuver for weeks. A new series of explosions lit up the battlefield, and Sun Wu noticed something he had missed before. The precision of the detonations, the careful spacing of the vehicles, the way aircraft swooped in at exactly the right moment. This wasn't chaos. This was choreography. "Lieutenant," Keita asked slowly, "how often do you conduct exercises of this scale?" Rogers checked his device again. "This one? Medium-sized, really. We run different scenarios pretty much year-round. Keeps us sharp." Sun Wu felt his scales ripple with a new sensation. Not fear now, but something closer to awe. The Coalition had assumed Earth's military capabilities were primitive based on their technology. Watching the intricate dance of forces below, he realized they had made a fundamental error in judgment. The shuttle banked again, heading toward their landing zone. As they descended, Sun Wu couldn't tear his eyes away from the window. He had come to Earth expecting to observe a simple military drill. Instead, he was watching something that would force the Coalition to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about human warfare. And Lieutenant Rogers just sat there, checking his device, as casual as if he were watching a sporting event, rather than a display of military might that would send shockwaves through Coalition space. Something wasn't adding up indeed. In the debriefing room at the NATO base, Sun Wu's scales were still vibrating from the ground explosions they had witnessed earlier. The room was simple by Coalition standards, just a table, chairs, and some primitive display screens showing replay footage of the day's events. But right now, it felt like the center of a reality-shattering revelation. "What do you mean, no one died?" Sun Wu demanded, his translator working overtime to convey the mix of disbelief and confusion in his voice. His tail lashed back and forth, a sign of agitation that Lieutenant Rogers politely pretended not to notice. Rogers smiled, that same maddeningly calm smile he'd worn throughout the entire exercise. "It was just a NATO exercise, sir. We do this kind of thing regularly to stay sharp." He pulled up more footage on the screen, showing soldiers emerging unharmed from vehicles that had appeared to be destroyed. The alien delegation sat in stunned silence. Kitez's scales had turned an unusually pale shade, while the other members of the observation team seemed frozen in their seats. The display of coordination and firepower they'd witnessed, the precise airstrikes, the rapid deployment of forces, the complex logistics, had all been practice. But the explosions. Sun Wu gestured at the replay footage. The destroyed vehicles. "Training munitions," Rogers explained, picking up what looked like a spent shell casing from the table. "They make a lot of noise and light, kick up some dirt, but no real damage. The destroyed vehicles just power down and play dead, so to speak." Kaita finally found his voice. "How often?" he managed to ask, his translator crackling with static from his unsteady tone. "Oh, we run different scales of exercises pretty much continuously," Rogers replied, flipping through more footage on his tablet. "This was actually a medium-sized one. Next month we've got a much larger operation planned with forces from 12 different nations." Sun Wu's primary heart nearly stopped. "Larger? And you said 12 nations. But how do you coordinate?" "Practice," Rogers said simply. "Lots and lots of practice. We run smaller exercises almost daily, medium ones like this monthly, and major international operations several times a year. That's not counting individual unit training, special forces exercises, and naval drills." The aliens exchanged looks of growing horror, not at the destruction they'd witnessed, but at the implications of what Rogers was saying. The Coalition's military forces ran simulations, of course, but actual physical exercises had been abandoned centuries ago as inefficient and wasteful. "Lieutenant," Sun Wu said carefully, "are you saying that human military forces maintain this level of practical training constantly?" "Of course," Rogers nodded, pulling up a calendar dense with scheduled exercises. "Have to stay ready. Never know when skills might be needed in a real situation." Kaita leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overtaking his shock. "But the resources involved, the fuel, the ammunition, the wear on equipment." "Worth every penny," Rogers interrupted. "Simulation is good, but nothing beats actual experience. Feeling the ground shake under your feet, dealing with unexpected weather changes, managing real fatigue and stress. You can't replicate that in a computer." Sun Wu felt a chill run down his spine as he remembered the Coalition's assessment of human military capabilities. They had judged Earth's forces purely on their technological level, which was centuries behind the Coalition's. But watching the footage again, seeing the seamless coordination between air and ground forces, the rapid adaptation to changing conditions, the complex dance of units moving in perfect synchronization. "And this was a medium-sized exercise?" he asked again, hoping he'd misheard. Rogers grinned. "Want to see the plans for next month's big one?" As the lieutenant pulled up more files, Sun Wu realized with growing clarity that the Coalition had made a catastrophic error in judgment. They had assumed that humanity's primitive technology made them militarily inferior. Instead, they had stumbled upon a species that treated peace as nothing more than an opportunity to perfect the art of war. The implications were staggering. While coalition forces relied on superior technology and computer simulations, humanity was constantly honing their skills in real-world conditions. They weren't just maintaining their military capabilities, they were actively evolving them, testing new strategies, finding new solutions to problems the coalition had long ago decided were solved. And they did it all with a casual efficiency that made it even more terrifying. The Grand Chamber of the Coalition Council, usually a model of decorum and order, had descended into chaos. The crystalline walls, designed to amplify and clarify speech, now echoed with dozens of angry voices in various languages as representatives from 30 different species tried to speak over one another. Ambassador Myre stood at the central podium, her scales shifting between colors of stress and concern as she attempted to maintain some semblance of order. The holographic displays around the chamber showed footage from the human military exercises, each image adding fuel to the growing panic. Order. The council will maintain order. Myre's voice cut through the cacophony, but the effect was temporary at best. If this is how they practice, shouted the Viridian delegate, his crystalline form vibrating with agitation. Imagine how they actually fight. The chamber erupted again. The Centaurian representative's tentacles were practically tied in knots with anxiety, while the normally stoic Rigelian delegate had turned an alarming shade of purple. They conduct these exercises continuously. The Proximan representative hissed through her translator. Our long-range observers have confirmed it. Multiple operations running simultaneously across their planet. They never stop. Myre watched as the political alliance her people had spent centuries building threatened to fracture over the existence of a species that treated warfare like a daily sport. The implications were sending shockwaves through every level of coalition society. What about the resource expenditure? Called out another voice. The fuel consumption alone should cripple their economy. It defies all logical analysis. The statistical analysis director, a tall, spindly being named Kruval, stepped forward with a data crystal. Our calculations suggest they dedicate approximately 2 to 3% of their global resources to these exercises. It's efficient, somehow. This revelation brought a new wave of concern murmuring. The coalition spent far more on their military simulations, yet their forces had never attempted anything on the scale of what humans considered routine practice. Ambassador Myre, the Arcturus delegate's voice cut through the noise. Your observation team spent the most time studying these humans. Tell us, are they preparing for war? The chamber fell silent, all eyes and sensory organs turning to Myre. She took a moment to compose herself, her scales settling into a neutral shade. No, she said finally. They're not preparing for war. They're preparing for everything. She gestured, and new footage appeared in the chamber's center. Humans training in Arctic conditions, desert warfare, urban combat, space operations, underwater maneuvers. Look at their methodology, she continued. They don't just practice fighting. They practice adaptation, problem-solving, innovation. Their exercises aren't about winning predetermined scenarios. They're about learning to handle any situation that might arise. The silence deepened as the implications sank in. The coalition's military doctrine was based on technological superiority and perfect simulation. But these humans, they were building something else entirely. We need to reconsider our approach, Myre said into the quiet. Our initial assessment of Earth was based solely on their technological level. We failed to understand that they've developed something potentially more valuable. A culture of constant improvement and readiness. Are you suggesting we adopt their methods? The question came from a shocked-looking delegate in the upper tier. I'm suggesting we need to understand them better before we make any decisions about Earth's place in the galactic community. The footage continued to play, showing human forces adapting to deliberately induced equipment failures, communications blackouts, and unexpected tactical changes. Each scene demonstrated a level of flexibility that coalition forces, for all their advanced technology, had never achieved. Myra could see the fear in her fellow delegates' postures and expressions. The coalition had encountered many species over the centuries, but never one that approached military readiness quite like this. Humans weren't just maintaining their forces, they were actively evolving them, constantly testing, adapting, improving. And they did it all with technology that the coalition had dismissed as primitive. The implications were clear. Either humanity would become a valuable ally, or they would emerge as the most dangerous potential adversary the coalition had ever encountered. The political stability of centuries hung in the balance, all because of a species that couldn't stop practicing for war even in times of peace. Professor Yunsa stepped into the inner circle's private chamber, her scales gleaming under the soft light of the ancient hall. The room, with its curved walls displaying the history of the coalition in living crystal, had hosted countless presentations over the millennia. But today's topic was shaking the foundations of their civilization's most basic assumptions. The assembled leaders watched intently as she activated her presentation crystal. The air filled with holographic displays showing various aspects of human society: military exercises, sports competitions, academic institutions, and industrial facilities. Distinguished members of the inner circle, Yunsa began, her voice steady despite her inner nervousness. My report on human culture has generated significant discussion, and I believe it's important to understand why. The images shifted, focusing on a human military exercise. Soldiers moved through difficult terrain, adapting their tactics in real time. At first, we thought this was unique to their military, she continued. But as we expanded our observation, we discovered something far more fundamental about human nature. The display changed to show a human sports competition. Athletes pushed themselves to physical limits. Trainers analyzed their movements. Teams adjusted their strategies mid-game. Their entire society is structured around constant improvement, she explained, her scales rippling with excitement. They don't just practice warfare. They practice everything, constantly pushing their limits, finding new methods, testing new strategies. One of the elder council members leaned forward. "Explain the implications, Professor." Yunsa gestured, and the display shifted to show parallel images, coalition training simulations alongside human practical exercises. "We've built our civilization on technological advancement," she said, each generation improving on the last through better technology. But humans, they improve themselves. Their bodies, their minds, their methods, everything is subject to constant refinement. The images changed again, showing human children in various learning environments. They start this process from birth. Their education system isn't just about acquiring knowledge. It's about learning how to learn, how to adapt, how to improve. The implications were staggering. The coalition's technological superiority, built over thousands of years, suddenly seemed less relevant when faced with a species that treated every day as an opportunity for advancement. "Look at their sports," Yunsa continued, showing footage of human athletes breaking records. They're constantly competing not just against each other, but against their own previous achievements. They celebrate when they improve by fractions of a second or tiny measurements of distance. The inner circle members watched in silence as she displayed more examples. Musicians practicing for hours, scientists running countless experiments, workers developing new skills. And this mindset, she emphasized, translates directly to their military capability. Their weapons may be primitive, but their ability to use them effectively, to adapt their tactics, to improve their techniques, it's unprecedented in our experience. One of the younger council members spoke up. "Are you suggesting they could pose a threat to the coalition?" Yunsa paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm suggesting that we need to fundamentally reconsider how we measure advancement. The humans don't just wait for technology to improve. They improve themselves while waiting for technology to catch up." The display showed a final series of images, human achievements throughout their history, each building on the last, each pushing boundaries further. Their technological progress may be slower than ours, she concluded, but their rate of adaptation, of improvement in using whatever technology they have, it's exponentially faster. And that's what makes them unique in our experience of spacefaring races. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Coalition had spent millennia perfecting their technology, while humans had spent their history perfecting themselves. As the council members began their discussions, Yoon-Suh watched the holographic displays continue to cycle through images of human achievement. She couldn't help but wonder what these remarkable beings would accomplish once they finally gained access to advanced technology. And more importantly, what the Coalition could learn from their relentless drive to improve. The Grand Chamber of the Coalition Council felt different today. Gone was the panic that had gripped the delegates 6 months ago when they first learned about Earth's military practices. Instead, a thoughtful silence filled the ancient hall as Admiral Do-won took his place at the central podium, his scales showing the calm colors of certainty. Looking out at the assembled representatives of 30 spacefaring species, Do-won remembered his first observation of Earth. How wrong their initial assumptions had been. How much they had learned since then. Esteemed members of the council, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I stand before you to deliver my final report on Earth and its people. What I have to share will change how we view not just humans, but ourselves. The holographic displays activated, showing scenes from the past 6 months of observation and interaction with Earth. Military exercises, sports competitions, academic achievements, industrial innovations, all demonstrating humanity's unique approach to improvement. We approached Earth seeking to acquire their military technology, he said, his voice carrying a note of humility that caught the attention of every delegate. We fail to understand that their true strength lies not in their weapons, but in their mindset. They don't train because they expect war. They train because they believe in being ready for anything. Do-won gestured to a series of images showing human military forces adapting to various challenges, equipment failures, weather changes, unexpected tactical situations. Their technology is primitive by our standards, he continued. Their weapons are simple, their vehicles basic, their communications rudimentary. Yet they achieve results that match or exceed our own capabilities through sheer dedication to improvement. The Admiral moved through the chamber, his tall frame casting shifting shadows as he walked among the delegates. We thought their constant military exercises were a sign of aggression or paranoia, he said. Instead, we discovered it's just one aspect of their cultural drive for betterment. They apply the same principles to everything they do. Education, sports, arts, science, industry. The displays showed humans in various settings, all engaged in practices and drills, all working to improve their skills. Consider this, Do-won said, pausing near the center of the chamber. While we perfect our simulation technology, they perfect themselves. While we rely on artificial environments to maintain our skills, they test themselves against reality every day. He paused, looking at the faces of the assembled delegates. Some showed understanding, others concern, but all were focused intently on his words. We wanted their technology. Instead, they taught us something far more valuable: the power of preparation, of constant improvement, of never taking peace for granted. They showed us that true advancement isn't just about having better tools. It's about becoming better at using whatever tools you have. The chamber remained silent as Do-won returned to the podium. The stakes of his next recommendation were not lost on anyone present. I propose we establish a permanent diplomatic mission to Earth, he said firmly, not to acquire their technology, but to learn from a species that has mastered the art of readiness itself. We have much to teach them about advanced technology, but they have even more to teach us about how to use it effectively. The voting crystals appeared before each delegate, glowing softly as they awaited input. One by one, they turned green. Approval. When the final crystal changed color, the result was unanimous. As the council session concluded, Do-won looked once more at the images of Earth still floating in the chamber's displays. He remembered his first dismissive assessment of their primitive technology and how thoroughly these humans had proven him wrong. The Coalition had sought to learn Earth's military secrets. Instead, they had discovered something far more valuable, a fundamental truth about the nature of true advancement. It wasn't the technology that mattered most, but the mindset of those who used it. And in that, humanity had proven themselves master teachers indeed.